Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jen Marples Show. Today, I have a beautiful guest. Her name is Dr. Suzanne Gilberg-Lenz, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Suzanne and hearing her speak at those menopause conferences you hear that I go to, the New Pause Symposium. So she is yet another one of these fabulous women out there wanting to make a difference and help us all live our very best midlives. And as an OB-GYN, she is perfectly poised to do that. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of her background because she knows of what she speaks. And so Suzanne went to USC Medical School. Sidebar, my father-in-law, who has since passed away, he was an OB-GYN and he went to USC Medical School. So Dr. George Marples, I don't know if you ever heard his name. He was the head of OB at, oh my God, what's the name of
At
the,
County USC? Well,
in
no.
Pasadena. He was at the
Oh,
Huntington. He was
Huntington.
the head of OB at the Huntington Hospital. So
Wow.
he's the generation or two above us. So if
Yeah.
he was alive right now, he'd be in his 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, just a complete sidebar. When I met him, very first time I met him, you'll get it OB humor. He had forceps on the table and he was threatening to toss the salad with it.
That's really old school.
Really old school.
Happens
And
to have some forceps at home.
yeah, so that was that. And then the kitty's name was Puss Puss. So we'll just leave that right there. George Marples, rest in peace. But that's his legacy.
Sounds like
But
a
you guys are
character.
aligned because you guys both went to the same medical school.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Dr. Suzanne is a huge voice out there, you all. She is speaking. She was on the Drew Barrymore show. She's got a book, The Menopause Bootcamp, Optimize Your Health, Empower Yourself, and Flourish as You Age. We are going to link that in the show notes. That's must reading for everyone. So she is just the most fabulous expert. And we are going to talk about her history a little bit, but then we're going to dig into the meat of perimenopause and menopause, because we were just talking before we got online here that as much as we are in this conversation, we know so many of you listening and so many out there who aren't listening to the show need information. You all need information because this is the most amazing time of life. Yet it comes with a little bit of challenges, but we are not our hormones. We are not, what's the thing somebody said? It's like, we are not our emotions and hormones. We are who we are. And this is something that we're experiencing. And it's a natural thing that we are experiencing. So with that whole intro, I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Suzanne, because you all need to hear what she has to say. So thank you just so much for being here. It's just an honor to have you on the show.
Pleasure.
We get
I'm
to
so
spend this
happy
time
to be
together.
here. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jen. I'm excited to hang out with you virtually and to talk and to meet your audience and see where it goes.
Yeah, so we're going to break it down. So before we
Yeah.
get into all the ins and outs of perimenopause and menopause, just give us a little bit of your background, like how you got into, wanting to be an OB-GYN, and then specifically how you really zeroed in on perimenopause and menopause. Because I know most doctors don't have the education.
Right.
Most doctors aren't focused on it. So what you're doing is so important. So tell us all how it got going.
I mean, the short version is when I went to medical school, I tried desperately to talk myself out of going into OB-GYN because I had a feeling it was going to be extremely interesting, but also very hard. And I was right. And I failed to talk myself out of it. We'll just leave it at that. I loved all of the variety that the field offered. It's medicine, it's surgery, it's bonding with people. I really think ultimately what drew me to it was that it wasn't one thing. And obviously obstetrics in and of itself is pretty magical. But I think in the end, what I know about myself is I really am interested in people. I'm interested in their stories, and the opportunity to get to know people over the course of their lifetimes was very, very appealing to me. And I have been very fortunate because that is what I have done. I've been in a practice where I've grown with my patients and they've grown with me, and I know them for decades. So it's pretty beautiful and awesome to walk side by side with somebody and then be there when they need me. And they've been there for me too. So that's how I got into OB-GYN. I got interested in menopause in a variety of ways. I think ultimately what happened was very early in my career, we all have key mentors. And one of my mentors was a woman who is a very, very renowned breast oncologist. And I met her during residency. And when I came out of my residency at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, some of my attending physicians were super generous and, would refer people to me. And so Dr. Philomena McAndrew was one of those people. And she started to refer her premenopausal breast cancer patients to me. And I was like, what am I doing? If you think you don't get trained in menopause, we definitely don't get trained in cancer survivorship. And it was kind of a new field at the time. And so I really just started reading and learning along with my patients and with her support. And a lot of them were dealing actually with premature menopause, or with menopause-like symptoms that were maybe transient, maybe not. And that's actually how I first started learning about menopause, because I had these 35-year-olds who were having chemo and then feeling menopausal and feeling terrible and leaving their gynecologist because they felt dismissed, or maybe they were triggered. It was the scene of the crime where they got diagnosed and they were seeing me. And I really had to teach myself. That's actually how it started. Then over time, my patients were aging with me. And what I was noticing was that people had no idea what was coming. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what to do. They were getting diagnosed with a lot of other things that maybe or maybe not were accurate, but nobody was framing it in the larger context of like, well, actually, your perimenopause and your menopause are contributing to your autoimmune disorder flaring more, or your long history of anxiety and depression are flaring right now because of perimenopause. And it's not just like write the Lexapro script, which by the way, I'm a fan of Lexapro, but no context to it, no conversation. And I think I was getting frustrated at the disservice that was being done. I also understood my colleagues' conflict over this. We don't get trained in it, like you mentioned. I think this has been repeated over and over and over. But also the system disincentivizes us to take the time. It takes a very long time to have a big conversation with a patient. And we don't get paid for that. And people are trying to just keep their practices open and not have 10 angry patients waiting after they spent 35 minutes with you. So, I mean, that's a whole other conversation that I really think needs to be had, and it's not being had in the space. And I'd love to make space for that. But I was doing that. And that's just kind of what happened. I also I'm board certified in integrative and holistic medicine, and I'm trained in Ayurveda. And I think these things came to bear and made me more interested in life cycle processes, in physiologic processes, in bigger and more comprehensive, holistic, individualized approaches rather than like write a script, goodbye. And I started getting a reputation for digging in and having a sort of a deeper and wider toolkit for what was going on with people, and just got more and more training and, found myself here. I ended up having a public conversation. I was interviewed by a friend of mine in probably 2018 about menopause. She was 20 years my junior. I was fascinated that she wanted to hear about it. I was fascinated and intrigued by who showed up to that event. It was a very, very diverse group of people, age-wise, everything else, and couldn't let go of it, Jen. And that's when I came up with Menopause Bootcamp, started actually doing these in-person events where people would have time to be educated about the terminology, to be educated about what are hormones, to be educated about what was going on in their body, about the wide variety of options that were out there, both evidence-based and not, what I felt they should be staying away from, what I felt they could be open to. We do a fitness routine. We did meditation. I thought people were coming for information, and they were, and they got that, but really they left with community, and so did I. And I think you and our relationship is evidence of that. The benefit to me personally, as a woman going through this experience, has been enormous. Not feeling isolated and alone in what the work I do even has been unbelievable. Like, I never could have anticipated that. And that is a really great kind of image for people entering into this time of their life and space to hang on to, that even the expert, the teacher, is going through it and needs things too. It's been so gratifying. So, that's how I wound up here. And it's ever evolving. It's very, very interesting. When I wrote the book, anybody who knows anything about book publication, like, I wrote the proposal. I started working on the proposal when the shutdown happened. I sold the book at the end, like November of 2020. It came out October of 2022. All of a sudden, everybody was talking about menopause. When I started the proposal, nobody was talking about menopause. Okay. And not nobody, but it wasn't the zeitgeist like it is now. It's so interesting.
It really is. Because I remember when we met at that first conference, you were launching that book.
Yeah, that was my book publication week. Yeah.
And that was such an amazing. So, a couple of points you brought up are really important: the sense of community and the sense of women not feeling alone. And certainly, I mean, I'm 53, so I'm in menopause. You know, I haven't had a period since I was 50. But when I briefly experienced perimenopause, I didn't know what the hell was going on. No one was talking about it. I sort of went crawling to a naturopath, and she was lovely and was helping support me. But still, there wasn't all this education of what exactly you're going through. And then I would go to my OB, who, to your point, everyone has a finite amount of time. There are babies being delivered. There's all these things. I mean, she delivered my twins. I've been with her. She knows my history, and it was rocky. I mean, I had all this stuff going on. And still there's never really enough time. So I love what you're doing, because you're building in this holistic piece. So I was kind of getting some information from over here, some I was reading, some I was like guessing, but it was, and I don't have time to go into it, and it's a story for another time. I talked to it on other podcasts, but it was a deep, dark time for me when I was in perimenopause.
Yeah.
So I had been on the, it's a very short story. I had been on the pill because I have endometriosis, and my doctor was like, okay, around 45, you can go off the pill to like, you should be fine. Went off the pill, and for 9 months, I hung on for dear life. I was almost suicidal. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get out of bed, and other things were going on. I was simultaneously shutting down a career and all of that, but everything was colliding. I thought I was going insane. I almost blew up my marriage, and I thought it was all me. I didn't have any idea or awareness. I do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what drives me. And I know it's part of what drives you. It's like, I don't want any other woman to suffer. And that's why you're on the show today, because I want to break down like what are the symptoms? Because I know they're so varied. And you
Yeah.
mentioned something that for me, having anxiety, like that was just like a line. It was just like, woo, that just came out and I couldn't get out of bed. I actually like turned into depression. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm a vibrant person. I'm not a girl who doesn't get out of bed on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So I thought I was going crazy. So I don't want anyone else to go crazy. So that was number one. Number two, the sense of community, and that the more we talk about it and we bring it to light and we normalize it, because how many, you said in your lectures, like 50 million of us are going through it. It's a
Yeah.
lot
Well,
of women.
6,000 women a day enter menopause. So just to remind your listeners and your watchers that menopause is actually the one day in your life that you've reached those 12 consecutive months without a period. And there's specific criteria between, over the age of 45, no other medical reason. Like, it gets complicated. We're not going to get into the weeds about hysterectomy and birth control pills and chemo and all these other things. But in general, that's the thing. And that's the other thing too, that I found that people are so confused by the terms. Menopause is being used for everything, which is fine. It's as long as we agree about what we're talking about. But I think what we're talking about in the ethos and the culture is the whole transition
Mm-hmm.
up to, in it, and then beyond, which is a third of our lives, because the average age of menopause is 51, and the average in North America, and the average lifespan is over 80. So we're spending at least a third of our lives. It's not like, okay, and done, next. No, this is the rest of our lives. So how we perceive ourselves, how we move through this, how we normalize it, how we help each other, and how we set ourselves up for the rest of our lives for a healthy aging process is so important. It cannot be underestimated. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole package. It's a psychological, it's a spiritual, it's a physical, it's a mental. And we have been very, very fortunate, you and I, to be in this community where people are talking about it, where we're all friends. We all help each other. We all amplify each other. It's not competitive. Like it's really beautiful. But there's only a certain amount of people who even know about this. I will tell you something that I tell the participants whenever I give a talk and whenever I do my boot camps. I remind people that they are the ones who are the early adopters. They are the first followers, and they're going to go out, and they're not obligated to do anything other than heal themselves and live their lives. But just by doing that, they're an example. People are going to ask questions. They're going to share, and it ripples. That ripple effect is massive. That pebble becomes a tsunami at the other end. And so when people get overwhelmed and feel defeated by it, I want people to remember that even the little things that they're doing for themselves are having such a positive impact on themselves and on everybody else. And that is how this is changing. My focus specifically has been on grassroots mobilization. I'm not so much of a top-down girl. It just doesn't really work for me. I've spent my life in and around institutions, but I've never been an institutional player for a lot of reasons. And I've seen change happen very effectively from the grassroots, especially when it comes to women's issues, women's health. And so when you talk about these things, when you do what you're doing and you talk about your story and you bring other people on who talk about their story, how they're navigating this time, oh my gosh, that's why I'll do every single podcast, like, because I want people to not feel like a victim of this. That's the patriarchal narrative. That's not your story.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion of all of that, because I'm deep into conversations about ageism in the workplace and women being supported, and no one's being we certainly weren't supported during pregnancy and childbearing years. And when we had our children, that was evident. And then of course, what's happening, now with ageism, and then with actually people realizing that women actually go through menopause and that we need to be supported in the workplace, because there's so many women who are quitting, and we're at our prime right now. We're literally at our prime.
Yep.
And we should be thriving in the workplace and not suffering. So that's a whole other conversation for another time. But I love what you said about sort of the grassroots approach, because I very much approached everything I'm doing the exact same. I call it kind of the Obama in the basement. Like, I'll talk at a church to one person. I'll talk to a group of 200 women. I'll go on a stage and talk to thousands. Like, I don't care, because if I can impact one woman, I have done my job. So I love, and I think that's why we're all so aligned, because we're not hoarding information. Our whole goal is to get the information out any way we can, so we can change women's lives.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, so let's rewind. What are the actual timings for perimenopause and menopause? You said the average age of the menopause, that when you haven't had the period for the year, is 51. But what are the symptoms of perimenopause? And then once you hit menopause, so you're in where I am, what are then those symptoms or things to look out for, just so we can have a clear understanding, so everyone is like, okay, I've heard it from a doctor. Here are the facts. What are the facts, Suzanne?
Well, I mean, the facts are that everybody's going to have their own experience. So that, I think that also makes this kind of confusing to people. But what I will say to you to frame this is, it's a lot like puberty. There are certain steps that are occurring, and we understand the physiology that is driving it, but everybody does not experience it exactly the same way. The kind of manifestations of it are unique. There are some through lines, and I'll share those. But I think when people, again, understand, and you've already said this is a physiologic event. This is not a disease. It's not like there are diagnostic criteria for the disease that you have. This is not pathology. This is normal. The problem is it's mysterious because we haven't been talking about it. Nobody talked about it to us. So I want people to understand that. Having said that, the amount of time people can spend leading up to menopause, so perimenopause or the menopausal transition, can be up to a decade. For some people, it's more. So, and I think this is where it can get a little confusing too, because the other thing that I see is that people are very identified with their hormonal selves, but their hormonal self is not fixed. That will change over the course of your lifetime. Your hormonal cycle, your period, and everything that leads up to it and happens after it is not the same at 13, 20, 32, 45. So I really want people to take this in. It is not a disease. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that if it's uncomfortable, disruptive, you don't deserve attention or help or support. I'm not saying that, but when people get into like, I need to know what these things are, it's like, that's probably not going to help you. What I do see is this: the most classic stuff is that people who do experience a menstrual bleed start to notice changes. A lot of times what we'll see is they start getting closer together and heavier, and then people start to skip. So if you have an IUD or the pill or, a hysterectomy, this is not going to be you. During that time, we're seeing the ovary is functioning differently. It's making different amounts of estrogen and progesterone at those times of the cycle that they do. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. They can read about that, or we can, put some links up. But we do see that progesterone, which dominates the second half of our cycle from ovulation on, actually is declining. And it's declining in such a way that we have a little bit more estrogen, even though that's declining, than progesterone. And this is where people start to get into a lot of the really dark moods. If you've had a history of anxiety or depression, it can really come back. If you've never had panic or anxiety, it can happen. I had that. I'm Jewish. I'm an anxious person, but I was not like, I didn't have PMS. And in my late 30s, I was like dark, super irritable. Stuff that would be like annoying, but manageable is like the end of the world, blowing shit up, blowing up relationships. It's wild. Now, some of the blowing up relationships thing, I think, is also us just being done with putting ourselves last. I think some of it's actually good. Maybe the way it's coming out isn't so good, but that I see a lot of mood stuff, and it feels like people are possessed. They don't feel like themselves. So that's a big one. Vaginal dryness, sexual changes, even before anything obvious. So I see that a lot where people are like getting some discomfort, getting UTIs more, having more dry. All of a sudden they're like, do I need to use lube? Never had that before, and nothing else discernible is going on. Dry eyes, dry mouth, skin changes in general, for sure, sleep disruption. Obviously, hot flashes start coming into play for some people. And again, when people are still cycling, they'll notice it'll cycle. When people come in and they have the complaints, I ask them to please start tracking, get an app and start tracking, because they may notice patterns. And sometimes that's all they need, is the recognition of like, I'm not going crazy. This isn't going to ruin my life. Oh, it's the last 5 days until my period. Okay, I can do that. Or it's the last 5 days until my period and I'm going to kill somebody. Okay, so let's do something about it. Obviously there's issues of aging that we all face too. Frozen shoulder is a big one. I can't tell you how many I was seeing it with my friends and my patients. And I asked a friend of mine who's an orthopedist, and he said, oh yeah, that's totally a perimenopause thing. Yeah. I mean, the data is not so great, but there's more and more data on it. Actually, there's some data showing people on hormone replacement therapy do better, but so on and on. Joint pain, fatigue, libido changes, like all the things I think everybody talks about. But I think some of these little subtle changes start creeping in, like I said, even as early as people's late 30s.
That's it's so funny about my eyes popped open about the frozen shoulder, because I do a lot of yoga, and it seems like everyone my age has a shoulder situation. You said it and it made my shoulder. I have something actually kind of going on with my left shoulder. Who would have thunk it? As far as everything you said, like dryness, anxiety, I mean, I've experienced most of all of that.
Yeah.
And then was interesting when I did go off the pill. So I experienced this true perimenopause for almost a year. Yeah. I started breaking out worse than I ever did when I was a teenager. Yep. Chin, neck. I was like, what in the let's go to add insult to injury of already having anxiety and depression, and then to break out. So that was a lot of fun. So when we hit menopause then, so that would be me. So, I haven't had a period for 3 years. What are the things that we should be doing, or what do you recommend that we should be doing to help to be supportive during this time?
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to address something that you brought up earlier, which is like, so what happens when you go into what happens in menopause? And the thing is, anything goes. Like some of these symptoms will start to wane, and they will really get better for people. I mean, I definitely have many patients who a year in, they're not having any of these symptoms. I'll tell you the one thing they will continue to have: genitourinary syndrome of menopause. People will continue to have dryness that involves the vagina, the urethra. So it's also affecting urinary tract health, not just sexual health, but it can be just uncomfortable. So I will say, like, if that does not get addressed, because the majority of people, it will become a problem if we don't address it. So hormone therapy for other symptoms is a whole other podcast. But it's not like, okay, now, boom, menopause done, everything's better. Some people continue to have all the same symptoms that they were having, especially the hot flashing, the sleep disruption, brain fog, which is a combination, right? Because if you're not sleeping well, of course you're going to have brain fog and you're going to have fatigue and your mood's going to be messed up. So they become intertwined, and it's if you don't address, like, I feel like the sleep to me is the thing that needs to get addressed. We have to unwind what is going on with the sleep. Some of that's just an issue of aging, vasopressin diminishing. That's a hormone that we all make, men and women make, in order to literally suppress the need to urinate in the night. Like, some of that is us waking up for that, but some of it is also like subtle hot flashing, heart palpitations, stuff like that, and just like sleep changes that happen as we age. So if we don't get that sleep under control, we're not going to get anything else under control. I think the way people decide to manage it is largely based on how symptomatic they are, the choices that they feel are safe and available to them. And that includes being educated about hormone therapy not being the devil. I'm not saying everybody should be on menopausal hormone therapy. I'm saying nobody should be not doing it because of unfounded fears that are not their own. And so we will refer you to the Susan Dominus New York Times magazine article about 2 months ago, and at the book Estrogen Matters by Carol Tavris and Avram Blooming. There's a lot of misinterpretation. A lot of your friends, moms, aunties, and doctors have the wrong information and are scaring you. So just, if you decide you don't want to do hormones, that's cool, but I want it to be because you were educated about it. But I think the other thing that people need to be focusing on, and they should be focusing on it before they go into menopause, as I mentioned, is the rest of their lives, the health of the rest of your life. If you are hoping to live that another 30 years or more, you want to, as I said in the book, optimize it, flourish. Look, if you've had the worst lifestyle ever, it's never too late. Okay, it's never too late to start. But we should be focusing on our long-term health. Dementia, and Alzheimer's specifically, is far more common in women, 2 to 3 times more common in women than men of the same age. This is a huge issue. It's really just starting to dig in now. The data is very, very interesting. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women, not breast cancer. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I feel like I can say what I want about the breast cancer community. And I have nothing really negative to say, but I think people get scared about breast cancer. I understand it. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but is it the #1 killer of women? No, it's not even the #1 killer of breast cancer survivors. 70 to 80% of breast cancer survivors are going to get diagnosed early and going to die of heart disease. So like, we really need to be looking at that. And then of course, osteoporosis. So, fitness and lifestyle. And when I say fitness, I mean not just physical fitness, weight bearing and cardio and, all that, feeling good in your body, loving yourself, mental fitness, using your brain, socializing. The community that we're building is so important for our health. Having some kind of a spiritual practice. I don't care what that is. I'm not trying to force my religion or concept of a higher power on anybody here, but we know that when we see ourselves, like we've already discussed, as a part of a larger whole, we don't feel so alone. It is not so scary. And those feelings of comfort, of connection, are beneficial. It doesn't just feel good. There's science to support that it changes our lifespan and our lifestyle. So these are all, there's things that people can do right now that are free and readily available. I mean, I have lots of things in the book that I talk about that are things that people can do today that will improve their life today and for the ongoing future. It's doable. I think when people get overwhelmed, I totally understand. And when people are feeling bad and they come in the depths of despair and confusion, really my job at that point is to lend them a hand and like remind them they're going to get through it and I'm there to help them. But once people sort of stabilize and are feeling better, I want them to focus on, okay, what's the long view, and sharing that information with other people.
I love all of that. And you brought up a couple of good points. And I'm reading a lot of the same stuff that you're reading too. Some study just came out, and we'll link it in the show notes, about the fact that it was your sense of community and friendships that had a bigger impact on your longevity than almost anything else.
There's that data is not new. There's always something else coming out that demonstrates it. And I love science, but I just told you I'm also board certified in integrative and holistic, and I'm a very common sense person. The reality is this, do we really need to keep proving things that are common sense? I mean, I understand that people will do that, and I appreciate that they're doing it. My personal perspective, my professional perspective is, like, I did a post on grounding. Do I need to prove that grounding, it feels good? If it feels good to you to put your feet on the bare earth, why on earth do I need to prove that that feels good? Like, who cares? It happens to be that there's science, actually. It turns out there's science to this. It turns out there's science to, you can actually detect heart rhythms 6 feet outside of someone's body. Okay, that is proof of vibes. Yeah, I am that person. I believe. But did you ever walk into a room and sense what was going on? Hell yes.
Oh, of course.
So do you need to do a study for that? Come on, give me a break.
I'm with you on all that. And so, I'm Miss Woo Woo, like whatever. Like, yeah, go outside barefoot, stare at the sun. And it goes back to basics, like you're saying. It's like eat healthy foods, nothing processed, move your body, laugh, go all in on joy and love. And, I say this all the time, and other people have said it on the podcast too, like you said this, the most important thing we can do to ourselves right now, especially at midlife, is heal ourselves.
Yeah.
If you need, because a lot of things kind of rear their ugly heads. If there's stuff you haven't dealt with in the past, like just go, like I joked, go see a doctor and get rid of it. See that therapist, do what you need to do. And that's going to have that ripple effect. Like, you don't need to go try to change the world and do all these things, but just by me being where I am and doing all the work that I've done on myself, I have a happy home. My kids see that. They see mom's caring about herself. That gives them permission to care about themselves.
Yeah.
And so just that, if everyone has that little ripple effect just between their four walls, it's going to be an incredible, incredible waves will be made. So I think a lot of us get overwhelmed, like, well, I have to do all this and this. I'm like, nope, like you said, it can just be as simple as healing yourself and being okay. Exactly. And stepping into this next phase, healthy and sturdy and looking at the long game, not like what's right ahead of you. Because I was just having this conversation this morning at yoga, and this woman was doing something, and I said, just watch me. I did yoga teacher training a million years ago, and anybody who's done it, you see everybody pull back. There's no ego here. No one's proving anything. If something is off, like I could lay in Shavasana half the time. I ain't got nothing to prove. I'm here to live to 100. This is a long game for me. I'm not trying to throw things out. And I think that's just sort of a metaphor for everything. It's like the long game. It's like, if it's yoga, if it's whatever, it's nutrition, we've got to think long term. So I want to ask you this question, because this comes up a ton. And I know you're in Los Angeles, I'm in the Bay Area, and you wouldn't think that these questions come up. And I know you're going to shock us with some things your patients come to you with. I have a friend who went to her doctor, happened to be male, but I know this could be female too. She was going in with her symptoms. She's closing in on 50. And he's like, that's all in your head.
Oh,
basically told her everything she was experiencing was in her head. She goes to this group chat of us, and we're all like, leave that doctor. You need to find somebody else. It's absolutely not in your head. But if that's happening in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I talk to women all across the country, and I know a woman right now in the South who's making it her mission to help women demystify menopause and offer support, because there's nothing, no one is educated where she is. What are women supposed to do? Like, how do we find the support?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I think that's part of what drove the big interest in it over the last couple of years. I do think everybody being isolated at home and online actually had some side benefits, especially for women in our age group and younger, because people started talking to each other and meeting, and a lot of people started, these social platforms. And look, they're not all good, and I think you have to be very discerning. But I think those communities exist online. I think it's a matter of directing people in the right to the right sources. And also, I don't think this is going to be the solution for everything or everybody, but I do think that some of the bigger telehealth companies and the companies that are producing products that are aimed at this stage of women are creating platforms and communities where people can benefit from information and from like vetted sources. I'm not in the crowd that thinks that we're being manipulated and marketed to. Of course we're being marketed to. You live in the United States. It's a capitalist society. I mean, I'm not sure what planet some of these critics are from. And also, it's so misogynist and ageist to infantilize us. I am 57. I know I can, first of all, if I make a mistake, I can figure it out. And I got this far. It's like, so like, what are we, babies? And we can't make any decisions? Come on. We're only going to be prey. Now, having said that, I have a lot of patients come to me who have been prey. They found their way to me So, I mean, when you talk about the shit that walks in my door, I can't get on hormones because I'm not in menopause yet. I had my hormones tested in XYZ. What? No, I'm on, and they're on the pill and they're on, like, what? That is like, doesn't even make any sense. Hormone testing is, as in general, like unnecessary and bullshit, and people are taking your money. The pellet thing makes me cuckoo bananas. And I have people come in, and that is when I do have to test them. And they have, 6 or 7 times the normal amount of testosterone. And of course, they feel crazy. They felt great for a minute, and then they feel insane, or they're bleeding, or they're having a problem. So I sort of see 2 varieties. One is people being scared off or told they can't do anything, including the dismissal piece, and the like overdoing it, and they're spending a ton of money on stuff that doesn't even make sense and is made up. And these people are taking their money, basically taking their money and their time and potentially their health. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of educating people. I will say, though, they're going online, they're talking to their friends, and they are coming to people like me, and they are buying books that are written by authors that actually know what they're talking about, or finding the podcasts like these where they can actually get some trusted sources of information. And I think the more that we talk and the more we don't isolate it, the more we don't fall prey to the shame and the stigma around it, because this whole idea, like, if you talk about it, then you're admitting that you're a certain age. And of course, that's terrible, because women aren't allowed to age. I mean, obviously I'm not involved in that.
Well,
I'm like,
me neither, because the tagline here is "You're not too fucking old to go to the fuck
right,
you want." So that is
right.
not part of this thing. But I know
that some
it's
of our
hard for a
friends,
lot of people.
yes. And I think that the women ahead of us, that was a big, big issue for them. And I am seeing, it's so interesting, because now what's happening is, I felt like I was playing catch up with women my age, and they're like in their 50s. Now I'm seeing people much younger coming in, and I'm talking like 40, buying the book and wanting to talk about this now, well before. And this shift has occurred, Jen, in the space of 6 months. Truly, it's amazing. I did not have 40-year-olds coming to me last year asking about this. I absolutely did not. Everybody's talking about it now. So this is a good thing.
It is a really good thing. And it makes me so happy. But still, we have that, and we still have so much farther to go. I was telling you before we got on about my sister, if you're listening, and I will point her to this because she's experiencing perimenopause. And I said, you've got to listen to all this. And I said, your own sister is in this space of midlife. So, tune in, because there are resources here. And I do it for people like my sister, who are like, what's happening to me? I feel crazy. Things are changing and all of that. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a woman who said, and some women have said this, like, do we just print out studies? Do we print out resources? And do we take those then into the doctors that we have to show and to demand what we need? So what do we do with the doctors we have if they're not supporting us? What can you tell everybody?
I think it's complicated because, I think people who have access to care and do have choices, if their doctor is hostile, dismissive, and rude, they really should walk. They should just get another doctor. And there are plenty of sources online. Menopause.org has a physician locator. These are doctors that are trained by North American Menopause Society, which is now changing to Menopause Society. I don't think that's the only place to go, by the way, but I think that's, at least, these people are well trained. I think that some of the online platforms like Evernow and Geneve and Alloy are really, I think they're doing a good job. They're not doing a deep dive. Let's be honest. They're doing quick telehealth. Here's your hormones. Okay. So it's better than nothing. But I do think you got to be careful. If you come in and you, create a hostile environment, it's not going to benefit you. So some people might be like, I'm not here to take care of my doctor's feelings. Cool. Agreed. But I think you have to understand what you're working with. This person has worked really hard to get where they are. They actually do care. They really do. And they probably don't have the training, the time, or the understanding. So I don't think approaching them in a way that's like attacking their knowledge base is the best way to do it. I think if someone's fighting you on something, yes, bring it. And I have helped patients with this where they're seeing me and their oncologist or hematologist is giving them a hard time. I'm okay. Here's the article. I have a whole thing in my book on how to advocate for yourself in a cooperative manner that will bring you and your doctor into better alignment, or help you understand if this is a doctor you can work with. I think a lot of it is just asking questions. Why are you saying I can't do this? what if I did that? I mean, whatever, there's a whole thing. And it was really funny. I had a patient come into me who read my book and brought it into me. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, you probably don't have to advocate with me as much, but that's good. Let's do it. I've had patients reach out to me and say, I have a long-time relationship with my physician. I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere, and I used this strategy and it worked. So I think there are ways to approach. And I think approaching with love, curiosity, and like understanding where that person's coming from is probably going to be better than like, you suck, didn't you know this thing?
Oh, that's really great. It's a really great way to look at it. And I know that's going to help so many women right now. And it's even making me think about certain things, because going in thinking people have your best result in mind, and understanding also that the other person, your doctor, is a human too, and is constrained. And we're not going to talk about insurance in the state of, the medical world right now. That's another conversation, but it is
yeah,
because of the time. And I think just being able to advocate for yourself and try to get what you need, but do it in a nice diplomatic manner. I just had this conversation with my doctor about just dermatology and on a whole other thing, but I knew I needed to advocate for myself, but I came at it as loving kindness and saying, this is my history, I need to do this, and blah 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 blah. So how can we do this together and do it quickly to get something taken care of? But yeah, no, you get more with honey. It's really, you get more with honey than with salt, right? So everyone's going to go get this book. So we're going to link that in the show notes, because we're going to need, that's going to be our Bible. So it's going to help us get through all the things we need to get through. So I only have you for a little bit more time. So I want to ask you just a couple general fun questions about being a woman in midlife. What do you think, apart from menopause, right now is the hardest thing for women right now at midlife?
I think unwinding the stories that we adopted as our own. I think a lot of us are grieving both the loss of who we thought we were, who we thought we could be, who we thought we wanted to be, whether that's like, we're aging and we don't have as much time, or our bodies aren't doing exactly the way we would like it to do it, or maybe our relationships are changing, or if we have kids, they're moving on, or whatever, our job isn't serving us. So there's a lot of grief. But I think a lot of it is also because I've noticed myself, it's this reckoning with how much of who I thought I was or was supposed to be wasn't even really generated by me. It was generated by what we were told we were supposed to be. I actually had this conversation with my one of my best friends, who's a man, last night, and we were talking about, friends of ours, and for women in particular who had lived a more traditional lifestyle, what they were facing as their kids left the house, and what was that going to be like. And he was talking about a specific couple that we're close with, and I was really, and he was saying it with love in his heart, by the way, and he was saying he had talked to this person's husband, and he was expressing concern, our youngest is going to college, how's she going to be? And I was like, she's fine, she's great. By the way, because her whole life isn't to serve you all. Like, she made it her life to serve you all, and she's ready to do her thing. Don't worry so much about her. She's okay. I talked to her yesterday. I was a little bit like, wow. I mean, it was from this loving place, but it also, like, everybody in that conversation had agreed that patriarchy and misogyny was where it's at. Like, they weren't even aware, and they weren't doing it. I'm not saying this to criticize them. We all were, especially I'm 57. I'm older than you. A little bit older than you. And we were raised in a very specific way. So I think that's been a big job for me personally.
Well, I love that perspective. And it is, and I've talked about this before too, it's very much look at where you are now. And I had my own reckoning when I shut down my firm, because that's how we were raised. It was achieve, get the job. And then you're and then you're like, did I even ask the question if I'm liking what I'm doing? Does this make me happy? And we were all told, like in my household, it was kind of like death and taxes. To work is to suffer. It's like, is that how we're meant to live? Mm-hmm. So there's so much opportunity now to really evaluate that. And I was just reading something, I think it was Chip Conley was writing it, like, because he runs the Modern Elder Academy. It was like, it's just a real opportunity to kind of break it all down and step out and step into something that actually serves you. And you might not need to like burn down your whole career, but certainly add things in that bring you joy. So why can't you pick up something new? Pottery class, yoga, salsa dancing, whatever it is, write that book. But we crave this, like, I think this deeper connection to source and to purpose. Yeah. We got to, like you said before, we got to unpack all that bullshit if it's still, circulating, and then really understand that a lot of how we were living our lives, just buying the house, getting married, having the kid, all this stuff was just the way we were sort of taught, and we can live our lives however we want. And it's so freeing. It's so freeing.
I'm going to be teaching at Modern Elder Academy next year.
Are you
excited? Yes.
Ooh, I have that on my vision board.
So excited. Anyways, I'll tell you.
I can't wait to hear all about that. Yeah. What do you wish for women in midlife?
I wish for them to see it as just as another rebirth. It's just another phase, and it's really a huge opportunity. There's a lot of things that we get to let go of. Yes, there's things we have to let go of, but in the letting go, we're making space for more and new, or ourselves, or whatever, or rest, or whatever it is. It's not, I talk about this all the time, but it is no endings are also beginnings.
Oh, I love that. Endings are beginnings. And that's really, I want everyone to hear that right now, because there are so many friends right now grieving because they're sending kids off to college. And there's this, and I'm going to be there next year, and Lord help us all. But it's one ending, but it's also a beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's like that yin and that yang. And so you get to cry, but then there's also this other opportunity. And what's beautiful, going back to community, is being public about those feelings and literally showing up and crying on Instagram. The beautiful support in the community there. I'm getting chills because women are so freaking amazing. So we just need each other. And so when we're going through, we're crying with you. When you're crying about your kid leaving, I'm crying right there with you. And we can have this lovely support. So it's like they're going off, and there's these wonderful messages of, but now you're going to have this beautiful new relationship with your kids, and this, that, and the other. And we all need to hear that perspective. If it's about that, if it's about changing careers, or getting rid of the husband that doesn't serve you and looking for love, or whatever it is, like, we need each other. Yeah. I love that phrase, beginnings, endings. It's all so good. Final question for you before my final. What do you think the best thing is about being at midlife?
Oh, I have found just a renewed sense of creativity. Really, I was actually always a very creative person, and I was, actually a writer and a singer and all sorts of stuff as a kid that got, kind of left behind as I went into medicine. Although it didn't really, my creativity got formatted differently. But I'm really back in a very creative place, and that is so satisfying. I feel really connected to myself and to my purpose and to other people in a way that just grows every moment. And I just feel I'm like really appreciative. I have so much gratitude right now.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So I want you to finish the sentence. I'm not too fucking old too.
Oh, wow. I probably should have prepped for this one. I'm not too fucking old to have the next adventure. Like, it's just never over. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen next, which is so exciting.
Like, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, because there's so many adventures ahead. I mean, so many. I mean, I look at my mom. My parents are fairly young. They're 77, and they're planning trips and this, and she's still working. I'm like, and I look at her, I'm like, so she's 23, 24 years ahead of me. That's so many years just to get to that. And look at her, she's still working. So everybody, you're not too fucking old to plan your next adventure, and keep adventuring and keep being creative, because it ain't over till it's over. Okay. Exactly. So let's not future trip. Let's just live our lives to the fullest. Oh my gosh. It's been so amazing talking to you. And I know everyone's going to walk away with so many great resources, so much great insight. We're going to link your book and all that in the show notes. But for everyone right now, where can we find you, support you, follow you, and get more of Dr. Suzanne?
Well, first of all, Jen, thank you so much for this. It's so fun to talk to you and like have like a whole hour to talk to you. I'm really excited about that. I think the best thing to do is go to my website, and then all my socials are linked there. I'm most active on Instagram, but I'm everywhere. So the website is the Dr. Suzanne, TheDrSuzanne.com. And then it's all there.
Right. So we'll link all that in the show notes, and you can get Suzanne's book, and you'll be like super informed. You have all the tools you need wherever you are in the country, in the world, talking to your doctors. You're going to have those tools to kindly ask for what you need. So I love that. I love that you said that. It has been a joy, but lucky me, I know I get to see you soon, and we're going to be just doing this circuit till every last damn woman out there is empowered about midlife and has all the information that she needs about the most wonderful time in life. Let's just say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.